Hi, my name is Pat, and this is my channel, Book Chat with Pat, and I'm glad that you're here. I have been tagged twice on the Snob-O-Meter Tag, and this is just a really wonderful, delightful tag, and I wanted to do this right away. This is an original tag that was created by That Reading Guy, and I was tagged by John at Must Read More and by James at Quaint and Curious Volumes. So thank you, John and James, for tagging me on this really, really fun and creative tag created by That Reading Guy. So there are 12 prompts, 11 prompts about whether or not we have snobbish tendencies in our reading, and the 12th is to tag some others. And as you know, I will do that. So, number one, what is your definition of book snobbery? Well, I think book snobbery is having very, very rigid ideas about what constitutes literature or what constitutes worthy reading material, material that is worth our time. And I think that book snobbery also involves an attitude of condescension, not only toward the reading material, but perhaps toward the person who is consuming that reading material. You're a book snob, if you look down on what people read, or if you look down on the people for reading what you deem to be lesser or less worthy than what you would read. That's book snobbery. Number two, is there a genre or type of book you would never consider reading? Such as, would you ever read a romance? Or, if you regularly read romance, would you ever try a science fiction novel? I am a very diverse reader, and I've become only more diverse since I've joined BookTube. I don't think there is any genre that I would say, I am never going to read that. I was a person who most of my life never read science fiction, horror, or fantasy. And now those are three genres that I do read. I read science fiction avidly. I am just starting to explore fantasy and having a really good time. And I have dabbled in horror. I can't do hardcore horror, but there are horror authors that I really like. Now, are there things I would never pick up? You're never going to find me sitting down with an organic chemistry book. That's something that I probably wouldn't read, but because I wouldn't have a clue what I was reading. There are things that I probably don't read because they're just so far out of my ability level, but I don't think there are too many genres that I wouldn't at least try to read. I don't think of myself as a romance writer. I'm definitely not a romance writer. I don't think of myself as a romance reader. But if somebody gave me a book and said, this is a great romance novel and you need to read this, I probably would. So I don't think there are genres that I completely avoid. Number three, does erotica count as literature? Yes, it probably does. And like any other genre, there probably are some good writers of erotica, and there probably are some really bad, really trashy writers of erotica. Number four, is it better to read classic books than popular bestsellers? I'm hearing a value judgment in that question. Is it better to read classics than popular bestsellers? Well, for me, it might be. I would probably be more drawn to a classic than I would be drawn to a popular bestseller. But there could be great popular bestsellers out there. I'm sure there are. I definitely read contemporary fiction, but they're not always bestsellers. But for me personally, yes, I would rather read a classic than a popular bestseller. But I don't think that makes me better, or does it necessarily make the book better? There are, I don't know, different books for all kinds of occasions and all kinds of readers. So I don't like these better than questions. Okay, number 5. Have you ever bragged about reading a classic in order to sound smart? I mean, I don't think I try to sound smart. Maybe as a young person, I would have done that. And maybe as a very young and insecure teacher, I might have done that. I can't think of a time when I did, but, I can imagine that. I don't think it's something that I do anymore, though. Number 6, do audiobooks count as reading? What about comic books, and what about graphic novels? Well, comic books and graphic novels, yes, very definitely. And there's some great comic books and graphic novels. I mean, that's a whole genre unto itself, and it's really, really wonderful. So yes, comic books and graphic novels absolutely count as reading. And in fact, they probably get a lot of people to become readers. So yes. Now, the audiobook question seems to be a very controversial question on BookTube. And I'm just going to talk about my experience with audiobooks. Well, I think there may be different processes that are engaged, when you're just listening to a book versus just reading it on the page. I think that they are both ways of taking in stories. They may involve different parts of the brain. I'm not well versed in that. I don't really know, but I think it probably is different to listen than it is to read something on a page. Though they're both ways of taking in stories. But my own experience with audiobooks, I can say without a doubt that listening to audiobooks saved my reading life. I'm not a big consumer of audiobooks, but there was a time in my not very distant life when I was not able to read. I lost the ability to focus. And, that's a kind of a devastating thing for somebody, especially somebody who worked as an English teacher all her life and, basically read books and read students writing about the books for a living. And it was after I retired, and there was a time when I could not quiet what was going on in my brain when I was a newly retired person. And I couldn't read. And it was devastating. Here I am having all the time in the world and I can't read. And it was listening to audiobooks simultaneously while reading the text of a book that saved my reading life and got me back into reading again. And I feel like it saved my life, not just my reading life. So, audiobooks definitely count. Now, it's hard for me to just listen to a book. I mean, if I'm driving a car, I can listen. I'm not going to be reading on the page. If I'm on a treadmill at the gym, I can listen and I'm not reading on the page because looking at the page makes me dizzy if I'm trying to move at the same time. So in those two instances, I can exclusively listen. But it's hard for me to remember what I'm listening to if I only listen. So if I have an audiobook, I will almost always also have a print copy, and I have to eventually read simultaneously while I'm listening. So that's my story about audiobooks. Okay. Sorry, that was very long-winded. Number 7, have you ever looked down at someone for reading a popular fluff book, a book with little substance to it? For example, a self-help book or a celebrity memoir. I don't think I tend to look down on people. And I definitely don't look down on people for what they read. I will tell you that as a teacher for almost 40 years, my goal was to get kids to read. Now, yes, what we taught in our official curriculum, might have tended toward more, I don't know, classics, certainly in some courses, but we also taught a lot of very, very contemporary literature. But my goal was always to get kids to read. Because when you get a kid hooked on reading, then they're going to, the world is going to open up and they're going to read all kinds of things. Hopefully. I mean, it doesn't always work, but that's the goal. We used to have a summer reading list that we revised every year. And as we did this over time, we started to make the list much more kid-friendly and reader-friendly. And what we used to do, and I initiated this, I went to the kids themselves and I asked them for recommendations. And then, we would, in the department, evaluate all the suggestions that we got and decide what was going to go on our summer reading list. But I deferred to my readers, my students, and I got great suggestions. Now, every grade had a different level of reading, and different themes and different types of books, but I liked to defer to the kids to find out what they were into and what excited them. And I always had kids who were serious readers, and they always helped me come up with revisions for the list every single year. So, I want to know what people want to read, and I was very, very open to that. Okay. Number 8, have you ever been the recipient of someone else's snobbery? Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to name names, but I have 2 people in mind when I think about that. Yes, I have definitely, even as someone who reads widely and diversely, and, I consider myself to be pretty well read, I absolutely have had others look down their nose on my choice. And when we decided to read Sarah J. Maas for the I'm with the Band book club, I took a lot of flack for that. A lot of people thought that was somehow not something that I should be reading, that was sort of, I don't know, just not appropriate for me. And, I did eventually decide that I didn't want to read those, but, it wasn't because I'm a book snob. I don't think that's why I made that decision. So yeah, I have been the recipient of someone else's book snobbery, and it wasn't just there in that instance. It has happened in another important area of my life. Okay. Number 9, would you ever be friends with a snob? Maybe you already are. Yes. I would be friends with a book snob. I am friends with several book snobs. And, I think we all need to get over ourselves sometimes. But yes, I am friends with book snobs. Are people who don't read less sophisticated than people who do? That's a tough question. I guess so. I don't know if sophisticated is, what does it mean to be sophisticated? If you're sophisticated, you have knowledge of the world. So if you don't read, yeah, you probably do have less knowledge of the world, or maybe you have a less complex view of the world. Um, I guess so. I mean, I don't know. I Most of the people that I interact with on a regular basis, everybody reads. So I don't know. I'm going to have to come back to that. But yeah, I think if you don't read at all, um, something's got to, yeah, there has to be a limitation to your understanding of the world around you. Okay, number 11, measure yourself. Based on your answers to the previous 10 questions, would you qualify as a book snob? I'm going to let you tell me in the comments. Do I sound like a book snob? I don't think I am. I'm not feeling like I'm a book snob. I'm feeling like I'm a very open reader and a pretty accepting person of others. So while I might have been a book snob as a young person, a young adult, I don't think I'm a book snob. I know what I like, I know what I want to read, but I don't judge others. I really don't think I do. Okay, tag some people. Well, I hope people do this. If you're watching this and you would like to do this, please consider yourself tagged. I'm serious when I say that. And as I always do, I'm going to tag a whole bunch of people in the notes below because I think these are great questions. I think this leads to a wonderful discussion. You don't have to go get any books off your shelves to do this tag. And I'd love to see this spread around. So thank you, John and James, for tagging me and helping to advance this conversation. So, as always, I thank you for watching. I hope that you're doing well. I'll speak with you again soon. Take care.